My name is Suzie Spear. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is October 23rd, 2012. I have a home group. It is the Gratitude Study Group. We meet in Raleigh, North Carolina, downtown on Mondays and Thursdays, so I'm missing it tonight, but I'm very glad to be here. I have a sponsor. Her name is also Suzie. I have a service position in my home group. I'm the GSR. I have a service commitment at the prison in Raleigh, and I'm on the committee for the state convention. So I'm very active in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm actively sponsored. I meet with my sponsor every single week on the same day at the same time because that's what works for us. And we are in some kind of AA literature working through the steps. And I found that to be very beneficial to my sobriety, to be accountable to my sponsor. I see her more than that typically in a week, but I find that that's really helpful. I am going to tell you what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. And, I have a brother and a sister. I'm from Alabama originally. My parents divorced when I was really young. That doesn't make me an alcoholic. My mom remarried a bunch of times. That also does not make me an alcoholic. One of the men that she married long term was abusive. There were drugs and alcohol in the house. We did child labor for years, and none of that makes me an alcoholic. But when I first got here, I would have told you that all of those things were the reason that I drank. What I know today is I drank because I liked the effect produced by alcohol. It got me out of my head a little bit until it stopped working. And, once I had one, I didn't ever have one. I didn't ever try to have one, to be completely honest. I drank to get absolutely blackout drunk, and I just didn't care. So, we moved around a lot, and eventually we ended up in East Tennessee, and I really love East Tennessee, great place to grow up. However, I always felt just a little bit different than my brother and sister. I always felt like I was trying to get more attention from my parents or doing, whatever that may be. I was the bad kid in the family is what I'm saying. I was always causing trouble. And I moved out of my mom's house when I was in high school, just kind of, further the rebellion. And, I did not drink during that time. I was always really fearful of alcohol. I had seen what it had done in my family. I had seen, my mom go through a lot of situations revolving around alcohol. And I had a lot of fear when it came to alcohol. So I just thought that if I worked hard, maybe went to college, that didn't work out, that things would be okay. I definitely knew that alcohol played a part in the chaos in my family. Also growing up, I had really good examples of what it meant to have relationships with God. It was not from my parents. It was from both sets of my grandparents who, were both married long term. They had very different faiths, but they both had their faith system, and they attended church regularly, and they were involved. And, I remember going to church with them and just knowing that they felt at peace there. I never saw my grandparents drink, smoke, wear a bikini, curse, or any of that, and I could tell that they were happy and they had something that I wanted. Growing up, at some point, probably around middle school, I told my mom that I wanted to go to church, and she allowed me, my brother and sister, to attend church. And, I don't have anything negative to say about that experience. I felt really close to God. I thought that if I was a good girl and I did what I saw other people in church doing, that my situation at home would change. And when the abuse didn't stop and the drinking didn't stop and the drugs didn't stop after a few years, I just thought that God was not for me. I saw God work in other people's lives. I saw it work in my grandparents' lives, certainly. But, I thought that I just didn't come from, the right part of the family for that to work for me. So I continued to go. But I remember the day that I just said, this is not going to work for me, so I'll just kind of go through the motions and show up to get out of the house, but I don't really think it's going to work. So I remember, I drank a few times after high school. There's really nothing too much going on there. I wanted to fit in with my friends, but I didn't really want to get drunk because I still had that fear. But I can tell you exactly when I started drinking alcoholically. And I went to trade school and I finished that up in about a year. And while I was there, I, met a guy, of course, and he was a little bit older than me, and he told me I was 20 years old, and he said, well, Suzie, you're going to be 21 soon, and when you don't know how to drink in the bar, it's going to be embarrassing. And I thought that he was so smart. I was like, this is exactly, you are correct, sir. So I started drinking from that time on. I mean, probably that day. And being in East Tennessee and being around that boyfriend and a crowd of people, we would drink moonshine that was off the mountain, and we would drink whiskey. I would drink anything. I don't want to pretend like I was picky. I would drink anything, but we always had moonshine and whiskey available. So that's what I drank. And, when you drink moonshine, as long as you can keep it down, you're good. And so it took some practice to keep it down. But I eventually learned how to do that, or how to just eat moonshine cherries. And you could eat 10 of those and black out, and it would be great. So that's what I did. And, I never tried to control my drinking. Once I started drinking, I really found a solution. I was able to quiet a lot of the stuff that was going on in my head. I was able to not feel bad about not keeping obligations. I didn't feel bad for not calling my parents. Eventually, at some point, I cut off all contact with my mom, changed my phone number, did not care at all. It was like looking in a mirror, and I was not able to handle that. So I started drinking alcoholically, and the first things that I started to do, my job would interfere with my drinking some. So I noticed my boss had some weaknesses, and I would very quickly just pick up on that. I would work really hard. I would take her job. I would make my own schedule. And I had no problem working 12-hour days, 13-hour days on my feet, and then have a day off, because I knew on that day off I could drink all day if I wanted to. And I always did. So I very quickly did that, manipulated all of the people around me, and I was very good at my job. But I was also very good at manipulating everyone to do what I wanted so that I could drink. So I went through a couple of jobs like that, making people angry because I was just a disaster. That relationship was on and off for many years. And what I really liked to do is, I didn't like to drink in bars. I would go show up for, 30 minutes or an hour, and I would leave and go home and drink the way I wanted to, because I could sit in my garage that I wouldn't let anyone park in. And I had a table with a couple of chairs, a fan, and a refrigerator. And I would sit in that garage and chain smoke cigarettes and drink as much as possible and just call people on the phone. I would call my friends and my family and dump all my garbage on them and then hang up and call someone else. And my family to this day will still say, you have the worst luck with phones, Suzie. And I'm like, no, I told you, that was a complete lie. But that's what I like to do. And I like to just get on the phone and lie about anything and everything, trying to get pity. I couldn't get honest about what had happened, when I was growing up. I had a really hard time with that. So I would just lie about anything, start up a bunch of chaos, and hang up the phone and not care. I would go to bars every now and then, and I would be the girl who would pound as many shots as possible in a row and pass out in the corner. And my very kind boyfriend at the time would put a jacket over me and continue partying. And I just thought that was great. I thought he was so sweet for doing that. And I had no problem with drinking like that. That's just what I did. So at some point, I decided that that guy was the problem. And I called my sister who had moved to Raleigh, and I said, I think I'm just going to move to Raleigh. And I had told my sister this for so long. Years. Like, I'm just going to move where you are. I want to leave. I hate it here. Whatever. So I told her, I said, I think I'm just going to move to Raleigh. I was supposed to come see her like 5 weeks from that phone call. And she said, okay, I think that sounds great. We'll get you a U-Haul. You can stay with me and my husband, da-da-da. And, I said, I'm really serious this time. And as soon as we got off the phone, she texted me like where to pick up the U-Haul. I found a job and I moved to Raleigh. I also had no problem just up and leave. I didn't tell anyone really that I was moving. I told that boyfriend I was moving like maybe a week before I moved. I just didn't care how my actions affected other people because everything was about me and how I felt and what I wanted or what I wasn't getting. So I moved to North Carolina, and when I moved to North Carolina, my drinking, I didn't think it could ever get worse than what it was. But it got so much worse because I made no effort to meet anyone, make any friends. Then I didn't even have people like calling to invite me to do things, even though I never went. I didn't even have that, and I would sit on my porch now. It was a major downgrade for me. I had to sit on my porch of my apartment, my sister's apartment, and chain smoke cigarettes and call the ex-boyfriend or whoever else and hang up and just get absolutely wasted. And it was not a way to live. I hated it, but I didn't know what else to do. So I convinced my dad to move to Raleigh from Alabama because I was miserable and I wanted to change things up a little bit. And he did. I've always been really close with my dad, and we haven't lived in the same town in a very long time. So I was just so excited that he decided to uproot his entire life. He had never lived anywhere but Alabama and moved to North Carolina. I really wanted to go see him when he moved here. He lived maybe 15 minutes from me, also in Raleigh, and I just couldn't. I had to drink to function, and I didn't like to drink and drive. I still did, but I didn't like to do that. It took me a few months to go out to my dad's house and see him. And the only reason that I went to go see him is because I was feeling particularly bad about myself, and I wanted to do something to help him so that I could feel better about myself. It was always, if I was doing something for someone else, it was because I was going to get something in return. And if I didn't, I would let you know, like, you owe me. So I went to my dad's, and I helped him with a computer question, which just sucks. I do not work in tech, but I know enough to help my dad. And I can tell you, before I left my apartment, I know I drank because it was my day off work. I can't tell you what it was or how much. I know that I drank. And I can tell you that while I was there, I know that I drank. And I left there, and I was on my way home. And I got almost home, and I hit two people who were walking in their neighborhood with my car. And, alcohol had stopped working for me long before that accident happened. I was completely aware of what was going on. And, my family has always rallied around me no matter what trouble I've caused or what I've gotten myself into, or what guy I date that I just tell them is horrible. They've always just rallied around me. And I'd never been in trouble before, ever. So I call my sister. They take me to jail. I call my sister, and, she's like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm going to try to figure it out. And what I can tell you is when I went in front of the magistrate judge at like 1 a.m., he looked at me and he said, I hope that you had a really good time, because the man that you hit is most likely going to die, and I'm going to make sure that you spend 10 years to the rest of your life in prison. And then he just shooed me away. And I knew what that felt like because I hadn't been able to look at myself in the mirror for so long because of the things that I did when I was drinking. So I knew exactly how he felt. He didn't want me in front of him in his presence at all. So I knew that feeling, and it was really hard. It was really hard for me to deny the fact. I could deny up until that point that my drinking didn't hurt anyone else. I could always say, like, I usually drink alone, so my family, I don't hurt them, I don't hurt anyone, it's just me. And in that moment, it was truly a moment of clarity. Well, I could see how bad I'd hurt my family, and I could see how bad I'd hurt these two people. So my sister bailed me out of jail the next morning, and I called an attorney. He sent me to have an alcohol assessment, and that was the first time that I was ever completely honest about how much I was drinking. And it was this cute little old man, and I thought he was going to go easy on me because he just looked like my granddad. And he skipped all the first stuff and just flipped the page, and I was like, well, that's probably not good already. And he went directly to where it was talking about my drinking and how much I was drinking. And he was like, you're going to treatment. And, I really didn't know what that meant. I had never heard of AA before getting to AA. I had no clue it existed. I didn't know anything about it. I went to treatment. I've been to many treatments. The state of North Carolina told me I had to for some of them. And I think treatment is great. But what I can tell you is the 30-day inpatient treatment I went to, the outpatient, the rehabs, that is not why I'm sober today. I remember charts and graphs and chalk talks and all this different stuff, But I'm sober today because in that rehab facility, I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps. They took us to meetings while we were there, and I was willing. When I saw God on the wall, I didn't get afraid. I always believed in God, something greater than me. But I was willing to take my childhood God back if I had to, just so that I didn't have to continue living the way I was living. And so I went through treatment, and treatment was treatment. And my last day there, my counselor asked me, she said, so are you going to go to a meeting when you get home tonight? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I'm sure she could tell that I was not very motivated. So she called a woman that she knew in Raleigh, who just so happened to be an old timer, and she was maybe 31 years sober at the time. Gets on the phone and starts giving her all of my personal information, my name, my address, my phone number, and I thought that was a violation of my privacy, and I was very angry with her. And she handed me the phone after she gave this woman all my information, and this woman on the phone, who I've never met, said, I'm going to pick you up at 5 o'clock. And I was like, well, my family really would want to know where I'm going or who I'm with. They're going to be concerned. And she was like, that's not my problem. And I said, well, what meeting are we going to? What time does a meeting start? And she said, I will pick you up at 5. And she hung up. And I just thought that was so rude. And I was going to go to this meeting just to let her know that's not how you're supposed to treat people when they come out of treatment. And, her name is Lady, and she is an incredible woman, and I'm so glad that she picked me up and took me to that meeting because she introduced me to a fellowship of men and women. She took me to Gratitude, what is my home group still today, and she introduced me to all of these people, and all of these women swarmed me. They wanted my phone number. They wanted to give me theirs, and I was just going through the motions, but this is weird. I don't like it. But I knew that that's where the solution was. I knew that Alcoholics Anonymous was a solution to, my spiritual malady. I learned that much while I was in rehab. So I was willing to do what they told me. I got a sponsor. I felt like I could not get honest. They told me that I was going to go to prison. They just didn't know for how long. So I had a lot of trouble getting honest with the women in my home group about what was going on. I heard people tell their story, and I was looking for the differences. I was looking for that one person to talk about prison, and it was just men who talked about it, and I was like, well, that's not helpful. And I finally got a little bit willing to get honest because I was really scared of what was going to happen when I went to prison, and I did not want to drink again. So, my sponsor encouraged me to tell a few of my girlfriends from my home group what was going on, and I sat them down at coffee. I figured we should all be sitting down for this information, and I looked at them and I said, I really need to tell you what's going on. And one of those women looked at me and she said, are you going to jail or prison? Like, that happens all the time in AA and it's not a big deal. And I was so offended. I was like, have you been to jail or prison? And she said, well, no, but it happens all the time. And they have meetings in there, and I'll introduce you to the women that take the meetings in. And I just, I was like, oh, okay. And I'm pretty sure I didn't say another word the whole night because I was just so angry at her for making it better. And I did talk to some of those women who took the meetings in before I went to prison, and they did tell me how to get a big book, who took the meetings and how to find them. And I'll tell you, one of the very first amends that I made, I didn't do any of the steps in order the first time. I don't recommend it that way, but I put myself in a situation that I was going to prison. So I just did whatever was suggested. And, I do like to say, too, that those two people that I hit do not have any existing injuries today from that car accident. And I know that that's not me. And they wanted to talk to me at my sentencing. And I just didn't think I was going to be able to look them in the eyes. I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to do that. And my attorney said, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to even see them if you don't want to. But they have requested to talk to you. And I knew my sponsor was going to think this was a bad idea. I'm emotional, vulnerable. I'm going to go to prison, for God's sake. And she said, I think it's a good idea, even if you can't say anything. And I was able to hear them say that they forgave me already. And that was really hard. I don't even remember if I said anything at all or if I just cried. But that was an amazing moment, and that really kick-started me going to prison. So I did go to prison. I had a sponsor. I was sober for about 3 months before I went, and I was in a maximum security prison in Raleigh. And I don't recommend you go there at all. It was pretty tough, I keep it real lighthearted in the meetings. But it was pretty tough, and I'm so glad that members of Alcoholics Anonymous really rallied around me. I was a group project. I was a newcomer, I was insane, and I was in prison with a bunch of other people that didn't have drugs or alcohol, or the ones they wanted anyway. And it was a challenge. But I'll tell you, none of my drinking friends wrote to me while I was in prison, or sent me books, or sent me the grapevine, or came and visited me. My sponsor came, she was pregnant at the time, and she came to visit me while she was, 6 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant, 9 months pregnant. And I did not understand. I would tell her, please do not bring your unborn child into this prison. Do not let them pat you down. Like, you do not have to come see me. And she said, eventually you're going to understand the primary purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous and why I do this. She had me working with other alcoholics. I was on like the third step. I'm a pretty fast reader. And I read the big book fairly quickly, and I just knew I wasn't going to have to do all of the steps while I was in prison. Like, I wasn't going to have to make amends or, live spiritual principle. It's kind of hard to do that in prison. And she let me know really quick that I said that I would go to any lengths to stay sober, and if that meant writing a letter of amends from a prison facility, then that's what I needed to be willing to do. And I did not like that. I did not want them to stamp it. I was like, let me just send it to my sister, and then she can mail it so it doesn't have the prison stamp on it. And she's like, no. So, I did work all 12 steps while I was in prison, and I did sponsor other women, and I did take them through the steps and attend the meetings that I could. They had 2 meetings a week, and I was usually able to get to at least one. The women who came in there and brought those meetings, I have so much respect for anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous that does any kind of service, but of course the ones that go into the prisons, it's a tough deal. And the faculty there, they usually don't know anything about AA or don't care. And, I'm so grateful for those women because they helped me stay on the straight and narrow while I was there. My sponsor had to really explain things to me. I just could not understand certain things. And there was this time when I was in prison. This is how I learned about the traditions. Here's just one story. I was working in the kitchen, which was a very glamorous job for like 30 cents a day. And I was working in the kitchen. She said, what would you do if you were outside of prison and you had a job? I said, well, I'd work hard at it and, I'd do the best that I could. And she said, all right, well, that's what you're going to do. So I got promoted on the line to the head person. And the head person in the line gets to put the cookie on the tray and slide it out the window. So sugar to people, there are drugs and alcohol and cigarettes and all of that in prison. They're just really expensive and hard to come by. So sugar is the next best thing. And, there were people who have been locked up forever, were going to be there forever. And there was this one girl who was like 17. She'd already been in prison for 3 or 4 years. And she always got like a handful of cookies. And so I told my sponsor, I said, look, I really can't get with this whole spiritual principles deal right now because I'm probably going to get beat up. And she said, Suzie, are you praying on your knees every day and night? Yes. Are you working with other alcoholics? Yes. Are you going to the meeting? Yes. And she said, okay, well, God is going to take care of you. And I said, look, I just want you to tell my family that you told me this when something bad happens to me. And so I continued to one cookie, one tray, and she kept telling me every day something bad was going to happen, and one day it was going to happen. She said, a group of us are waiting for you when you get off work. And I had a lot of fear, but I'll tell you, I dropped to my knees in that prison kitchen, and I said a prayer, and that's all it took. I worked the next 4 or 5 hours, and when I got off of work, there was a group of women who walked me down to my quad. And one of them was the girlfriend of the girl who said she was going to beat me up. And, one of them looked at me and she said, you're trying to do something different. And we've seen a change in you. And, even though a lot of these women were not interested in a solution and they didn't want to do what I was doing, they saw a change in me. And that really just solidified to me that if I kept putting one foot in front of the other and doing what was suggested to me, that I would be okay. So, that was a pretty interesting moment. And she had to explain all of that to me. I didn't see any of that. I was like, I almost died today and it's your fault. I was in prison for a year. They moved me around a few times. I met other women who took the meetings into the facilities. It was pretty cool to meet other women who took the meetings in. I got out of prison, and that day was a Monday, and I was very happy to show up at my home group. It just wasn't a question for me. I just wanted a hot shower and to go to my home group. That is literally all I wanted, and I did that. And, there was a man, and he recently rejoined. He moved away, and he's back now. And he saw me, because I did not get honest with everyone in my home group about what was going on. I just up and disappeared one day. And I knew that people were going to be like, well, where have you been? Did you relapse? Did you go back out? And I was not ready to be like, no, I was in prison. I still had a lot of shame about it. And he came up to me and he said, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. He said, is your name Suzie? And I said, yeah, it is. And he said, it's good to see you. And I couldn't believe that he remembered my name, because I surely did not remember his. And I couldn't believe that he did not accuse me of being out there drinking or something. He just said, it's good to see you. And I knew then that I was in the right place. Throughout my sobriety, I have been able to form a relationship with God that it's incredible. I'm certainly not perfect. I fall off the beam. There are mornings that I just zip out the door, forget to pray, forget to read my daily reader. But I'm accountable today, and I have a group of women, and we're in a little text group, and someone will be like, oh, this part of that daily reading was great, and I'll have to tell myself and be like, can you send it to me, because I didn't read it? And I'm happy for that today, and those days are few and far between today. I make my arrangements in the morning, I get up and I pray and I spend time with God, and I thank God at night for everything that I have today. When I got out of prison, I got a new sponsor, and my sponsor had her baby and was about to have another one. So I got another sponsor, and I went through the 12 steps, sitting face to face at a table with the sponsor, and I would recommend doing it that way, reading the book out loud. It was amazing. I've always been told in sponsorship, when I was about to go to prison, they have the midwinter conference, and my sponsor at that time said, oh, you're going to greet at the door. And I'm like, this is not helpful to my situation. I'm about to go to prison. What is me greeting people going to do? Anything to help that. Today, I know how that goes. I understand it, but I certainly did not at that time. And I've been able to be in the middle of AA. I've been able to work the steps multiple times through. I've been able to clean up a lot of my wrongs. When I did my first 4-step, I was in prison, and it was very, very thorough. I had all the time in the world to write everything down, and I was able to face-to-face get some of that other stuff out when I got out of prison. But there were some amends that I was not able to make. And I learned that I had to make financial amends. I didn't like that. I owed the state of North Carolina quite a bit of money, and I didn't think they deserved it. But my sponsor explained to me that as long as I had creditors, as long as I owed people money, me working was a means to an end. It was not my money to have. And so I learned how to take my own coffee to the coffee shop. It was so embarrassing. I hated it. And there were old-timers that let me clean their houses. By pity, for sure. They gave me odd jobs to do so that I could pay off a lot of my financial amends. I did not have a driver's license for 4.5 years. North Carolina, I've noticed, likes to tell everyone their license is permanently revoked forever. And I had to go through the process 3 times before they gave it back to me, and I wanted to give up at that second time and just not do any of it again. And my sponsor encouraged me and said, look, when the time comes next year to do this, we'll do it again together. And we did, and I have a driver's license today. And I realize and know that driving is a privilege today. I wear my seatbelt, I drive the speed limit, I have car insurance. I'm not trying to get caught up with any of that. I made a lot of amends, a lot of family amends, and amends as I've been sponsored are not saying I'm sorry. It is changing my behaviors, paying back what I've taken. I hadn't talked to my mother in 9 years when I made amends with her, and I was about 4 years sober. And I talked to my sponsor about it over and over and over. She was tired of hearing about it, and she said, just let me know when you've made the phone call. And one day, it was just any other Tuesday, I was calling a few alcoholics. That was my day off from work during that time. And I just knew that it was time to call my mom. I just knew. And this is the first time that I've had that feeling, and I took immediate action on it. And I dropped to my knees and I said a little prayer, and I picked up the phone and I called my mom. And she answered the phone, and I was like, hey, Suzie. And she just said, Suzie Spear? She never thought in a million years I was going to call her. And I made arrangements to go see her a few weeks after that time. And, I really had in my mind that when I got sober, all my relationships around me would be the way that I wanted them to, because I am sober now. And a lot of my relationships were a lot better. But when I sat across the table from my mother, and she was, high and had been drinking, it was the first time that I did not have judgment of her. I could just see her as someone who was struggling, and I knew what that felt like. And I was able to make amends with her. She doesn't remember half of it, but that's not on me. But I was able to make amends with her and love her for exactly who she is. I'm never going to have the Brady Bunch family or whatever, the perfect family. And I had to realize that I'm not going to have the relationship that I, for whatever reason, think I deserve to have with a mother. But I can be a good daughter to her today. And I can call her, even if she tells me the same stories. I call her every Tuesday still. If she calls me on other days, I don't necessarily answer. But she knows that I'm going to talk to her every Tuesday. And I go see her a few times a year. So that was a really big one for me. As soon as I made that amends, the next time that I told my story, someone from my home group was like, you didn't talk about your childhood at all. And it was something that I didn't even realize that I was carrying around. I blamed my mother for everything. And until I made that amends, I would stand up here and tell you, if you want to hear about my childhood, find a talk that I made in 2000, maybe 14 or 15. And that's all it was. It was just talking about everything that my mom had done wrong. And I don't ever even think about it anymore, which is bizarre to me, to even stand up here and say. I have been able to. I'm a felon, I'm a criminal, whatever. And I thought that was worse than being an alcoholic. I'm like, okay, I can be an alcoholic, fine, I have a solution, this is great. But, I'm just like, I'm never going to be able to do anything. I'm never going to be able to, no one is ever going to want to date me, or, I'm not going to be able to have the job I want because I caused all this stuff. And I'm a felon, and people are going to see that. And I'll admit, it's been hard to find an apartment, but I still did it. I am in a relationship today, and it's a healthy one, which is also bizarre. I was able to open a business. I was spiritually dying at my job, and I complained about it for almost a complete year to my sponsor, and she kept telling me, when you're ready to make a change, let me know. And I thought she was going to tell me I had to go back to school, which I didn't want to do. And so I was just like, okay, whatever. And I wouldn't bring it up for a while, but there were women drinking at work and smoking weed and doing whatever. And I was managing this salon, and they didn't know that I was sober. They thought I was a goody two-shoes, which was also hilarious. But I was spiritually dying in this job, and my sponsor said, it's time for you to find something else. And so I went, from the salon I was managing, I went like 800 feet, and I was like, well, I'll just like see what this place is. And, I was able to open my own business. And that was a few months before I was going to get my driver's license, and I'd saved up money to get a car, paid off my financial amends, feeling good. And I said, well, I'll wait until after I get a car, obviously, to open a business, because, that's what you do. And she said, well, the opportunity is here now, and maybe you should pray about it. And so I did. And very begrudgingly, I told her, I said, if I'm not able to buy a car like 4 or 5 months from now, when I get a driver's license, I'm going to be so angry at you. And anyway, I opened a business, and 4 months later, I was able to buy a car. And I really cannot tell you how that happened. I worked very hard, obviously, but I still was going to 6 meetings a week, sponsoring women, putting Alcoholics Anonymous first. And I do that today because I'm able to. Now I make my own schedule around AA commitments. I'm not crazy. I don't take like months off at a time and think God is going to just give me money. But I am at my home group every time it meets. I'm at other groups. I go to the prison every single Friday. I was able to get a blue card and take meetings back into the prison that I was at. And I had a lot of fear about that, just being so self-centered. I was like, well, one of these guards is going to recognize me, and I'm going to be found out. And, my sponsor has a good way of just like putting me in my place and being like, no, they're not. And you go to the training. The first time that I was at the prison meeting and no one else showed up to go in with me, it was, I looked around the room, and it's like, well, where's the adult here? And, it was me. And I was like, this is crazy. I can't believe, that here I am in this place trying to help these women, like the women who did that for me years prior. It's completely full circle. And I'm so happy that I'm able to do that service today. You don't have to have been to prison or jail or have a record to do that service. I know people think that sometimes, but you don't. And it's been very rewarding. I have met some women in there who have gotten out, stayed sober for a while. None of them long-term yet, but we'll see what happens. I'm happy to be there to even tell them what AA is. I've been so blessed, and I feel like it's because I do the work. I've been told that it's because I do the work. I don't get to rest on my laurels in Alcoholics Anonymous, and there are times that I want to. There are times that I don't want to answer the phone for that person who has already called me 12 times today with little minor things. There are times that I just want to go home and go to sleep. I don't want to go to my home group, even though I love it and I love all the people there. And, I've been taught that I do things until I want to do them. And I've found that the more that I stay in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, the more I want to be in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's had its ups and downs. Like, I'll be like, oh, I know what that person's going to say in the meeting, and I'm not going to like it. Or, whatever the situation may be. But I can have compassion today. And I can try to be loving, kind, and tolerant of all people. And that is something that I never even wanted or cared about when I was drinking. Alcoholics Anonymous is a design for living for me. It's not something that I do in my spare time or my free time or when I've had a bad day. I've been taught in Alcoholics Anonymous to show up so that when I have a bad day, people around me know what is going on, and I don't have to show up and say, well, for the past 6 months, here's what's been going on, and I haven't done this, and I didn't do that, and so it doesn't have to be such a big thing. I don't have to be in the amount of pain that it took for me to get in here to make a change today, which is absolutely insane because I've never wanted to change anything about myself until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm so grateful for this program and for everyone in it who has helped me along the way, because there are so many of you who have. I pick up the phone and call people when I'm having a bad day, you know. It has its ups and downs, but I know that if I stay in the middle and I stay current with my sponsor and I'm still trying to help the sick and suffering alcoholic, that I'm going to be okay, because that's what has always happened since I've gotten sober. So thank you, Ina, for asking me to speak. Thanks, guys.